Okay, so a solo Popcorn Junkies review. It's for an 18 certificate film, so I couldn't have taken Maddie in with me even if I'd wanted to. The trailer for this, Overlord, was pretty extreme. I can't remember if Nadia saw it, but she wouldn't have liked me to take Maddie to see it. Basically a World War II zombie flick. An American crew team are dropped in behind enemy lines, I think the night before D-Day. And they land in France, and slowly across the film they discover that some pretty horrendous experimentation is happening by the Nazis. Produced by J.J. Abrams, it's been heavily promoted as a J.J. Abrams vehicle. That's not necessarily a bad thing, you know. J.J. Abrams for me, Cloverfield Lane, Super 8, Star Wars, you know, his name is usually a badge or a seal of approval, so I was kind of excited going in. I really liked the trailer. I really liked the scene that was featured in the trailer, which is the first scene of the film, which is within a sort of fighter bomber as they're flying over France and they're coming under attack. That's the first scene of the film, and I thought that was quite a powerful and impressive sequence. It was very sort of arresting, it was noisy, you felt like you were in the fog of war. But then quite quickly, once we landed in France, we moved into a sort of some quite pretty standard World War II filmmaking techniques. It reminded me at times of all those films I used to watch as a young lad with my granddad, like Guns of Navarone and Bridge over the River Kwai and things like that. There was something kind of strangely nostalgic about the way in which they landed behind enemy lines and then headed off into a French village which was being run, if you like, and policed by the German soldiers. And so this film did deliver for me at the beginning some really quintessential boyzone comic book American soldiers with their gun, kind of, you know, trying to do that thing that they did in is it Kelly's Heroes or Kelly's Angels, that film with Telly Savalas. Once they've landed behind enemy lines, the film is a long process of revealing the fact that the Germans are doing experiments on the locals to create a sort of, well, a sort of unkillable army of zombified kind of weird people. In a sense, that's the part of the film that should have been its strongest element, and yet it ended up being its weakest. I thought the build-up to them getting there was good. The feel of the film was one of a B-movie, and I couldn't work out whether they'd actually made the decision to sort of embrace its B-moviness. Some of the lines, the script was diabolical in parts, but sometimes it was so bad you couldn't help but feel, had the producer sort of actively pursued how bad it was. You know, were they going for cliche? And if they had, that would have been fine, but the performers at times weren't strong enough, I felt, to almost deliver how kitsch or how sort of naff the lines were. For example, I had a real problem with Wyatt Russell, who was the lead kind of commander or soldier in the group. I just found he was a bit weak. Jovan Adepo, I think that's how you pronounce his name, he was the lead character. I thought he was brilliant. He was really good. He was sort of disorientated and lost in the whole thing. Pilou Asbæk played the German officer, and I thought he was really good. He was very much like, he sort of made me think of Michael Shannon, and I kept sort of thinking of Michael Shannon in A Shape of Water, and I kept thinking, oh, it would have been so much better if Michael Shannon was in the part. Although, you know, as a villainous German officer, he was pretty good. But one of the weakest characters, I thought, was the sort of French mother stroke resistance fighter played by Mathilde Ollivier. I found her very, very weak, and so consequently, as soon as the film moved into this holed up in a French house and then trying to escape and go into the church to sort of finish their mission and, you know, deactivate the Germans' sort of antennae, it all just got a bit weak. So for me, the first act of the film was very strong. I liked us getting in. I wish they'd had a bit more fun with the kind of relationships between the guys. I thought a bit more tension could have been built into them all holding up in the house. You had these sort of one-liners between members of the team, but they didn't really fire up. It didn't ignite properly. And then we got to the sort of the horror of seeing what was going on in the church, which is where the Germans have got all these experiments going on. And there were some genuinely really creepy moments, you know, experiments happening with just severed heads, bodies in sacks with goo and gloop. This was all quite eerie, and definitely why it was given an 18 certificate. But it kind of just lost its way. It just sort of became a mashup of ever more increasingly squished heads and and creatures running around and people injecting syringes of strange serum into their arms and necks, and then suddenly it was only for dead people, but actually no, they were going to inject it into living people. And so it all just became a bit too silly. That made me think again at the end, is this really trying to be a B movie? So I thought it was going to be a bit more of a sort of self-aware, sophisticated, clever riff on World War II buddy soldier movies. And in the end, it was neither a zombie picture nor was it a World War II picture. And in a weird way, the weakest part of this film, I have to say all the way through it, was the rapport between all of the soldiers. You know, there was the sort of, you know, the faux American-Italian guy who kind of tried to have these wisecracking lines, and he was irritated with the young French boy in the house, but that didn't quite fire up. You had Wyatt Russell as the kind of the group leader, but he wasn't sort of strong enough and authoritative enough to kind of lead them. You have the photographer who, something awful happens to him, you know, quite early on in the film. But he also lacked a certain, you know, he took a couple of really badly posed photos of things to sort of, for us to get a sense of how annoying he was, and the fact that he wasn't really using a gun, he was using a camera. And so the film sort of builds to a crescendo of you know, everything blowing up and everyone getting injected. I felt it was an uneven film. It didn't know what it was going in, and it felt like at too many points in the execution of it, they thought they needed to make it this, or they thought they needed to make it that. You know, was it a buddy film? Was it a horror? Was it a zombie film? Was it a thriller? Was it a World War II film? What was it? I went into this really hopeful, really excited, really looking forward to it. It had that feel of a J.J. Abrams film. It had that feel where there's a sort of nice grade and a grain to the feeling of the footage. But it just fell short in the script writing, I think. I think it was the script writing. I think it was the story arc. But, you know, if you're wanting to go for some truly gruesome, laugh out loud, silly bits of kind of jamming things into heads and smashing things, yeah, go and see it late night with your mates. There's one particular scene where there's one character who's this sort of injected, steroided up, sort of German fighting, bald-headed thing. He was genuinely quite chilling. I mean, I haven't been able to shake the image of him from my head. He's quite a petrifying prospect. So that, you know, there are some striking moments. Maddie said, "Is it worth me seeing?" And I said, "Well, yeah, if you're in, you should go and see it just to see the gore." But beyond the gore, there's nothing clever. There was nothing clever in this film, and it felt like there could have been a lot of clever twists and a lot of clever turns. Instead, there were just a few creepy moments. So, unfortunately, J.J. Abrams, this is another little cross against your name after Star Trek and the Cloverfield Paradox, was it? So, yeah, you need to pull your finger out a bit, JJ. Do we need to worry about the new Star Wars film? Getting a little bit worried. I went in really wanting to like it, and I was going in really, really wanting to have a good roller coaster ride. I wanted to roll with the punches. I wanted it to be ridiculous, but I wanted it to be clever. It wasn't clever enough for me. It just wasn't clever enough for me. And it started promisingly, and it really sort of just fell apart, really. So I would probably give this a 3 out of 10, unfortunately.
For more film and family fun, don't forget to click the subscribe button and make sure to click the bell to never miss an update.